Lulai gave up his $1 million salary and quit his job at the world's leading gaming company, driven by the sole purpose of finding his missing brother in the digital world of gaming. A middle-aged man turned to Lulai with disappointment on his face, lamenting that Lulai, given his talent, could have owned the rights to the company's shares, rising to the rank of shareholder, but instead he chose to look into the mysterious case of disappearance, undermining both the company's interests and its public image. The board had no choice but to terminate Lulai's contract. Offering no explanation or justification upon hearing the sentence, he simply got up and walked away. The middle-aged man instructed his secretary to find a suitable replacement for Lulai, but after several attempts, he received no response from the secretary. She chose this position primarily to be closer to Lulai, to see him several times a day. With his resignation, gone was the appeal of the job. Gone was the constant yelling and fussing of the middle-aged man, annoying her patience. After he left the company, Lulai clutched a tattered photograph of him and his brothers during their childhood years. He found a clue to his older brother's whereabouts as his lone shadow prowled the busy city streets. At sunset, the realization caught up with him that he was lost. Lulai couldn't remember the way home. A known workaholic, rarely saw his home, returning only once. His terrible sense of direction every 2 years certainly didn't help after being helped by a passing cab. Lulai's driver stumbled into an apartment building where a violent scene was unfolding. A woman with a wet face tearfully pointed an accusing finger at the blonde-haired man. Her voice shaking, she demanded an explanation as to why his contacts listed 68 lovers, even though he promised she was his only one. The man tried to placate her with desperate hand gestures, but his explanations went unheeded. Overwhelmed with rage, she announced the end of their relationship and ran out of the room. At the conclusion of this spectacle, Lulai reached his destination and found that inside, a blonde-haired man was on his knees and weeping. Declaring his sincerity, he insisted that each woman held a unique and irreplaceable place in his heart and each was his only beloved. Noticing Lulai's appearance, the man's demeanor instantly changed, and he hurriedly ran up to Lulai, pouring him a drink as a greeting. Lulai took a seat on the couch, glancing at him. Pointing to the clothes and underwear scattered on the floor, he rebuked his brother for his lack of care in maintaining their living arrangements and his chaotic personal life. His brother, heedless of the rebuke, quickly turned his attention to Lulai's unusual visit and asked Lulai if he was the one planning to stay home longer this time. Lulai nodded upon hearing that. His brother's face lit up with excitement and he readily began making plans to entertain Lulai, but Lulai calmly informed him that he had found the clue to their older brother's disappearance after hearing about it from the younger brother. His demeanor changed drastically, his light-hearted appearance vanished. With a serious expression on his face, he stated that he had gathered all the equipment that Lulai had previously requested. At midnight, Phantom Moon is officially released. Lulai muttered that he is convinced that this game holds the key to his older brother's mysterious disappearance after a quiet dinner the brothers had at a restaurant. After waiting until midnight, Lulai took off his glasses, looked over to his brother, and in unison they put on the goggles of their VR devices. Immediately, the system requested personal identification and voiced a greeting from the Ghost Moon world, followed by the system's fairy helper named Cece. After a few moments of data loading, Lulai found himself awakening as a Modran village devotee, clad in a simple cloth garment. Lulai opened his character panel to get used to it. Soon after, his brother had called out to him from a nearby house. He had imagined that the purple-haired girl was a new acquaintance offering to complete the main quest together. Lulai remained in the dark about his brother's social abilities, brushing them off as he assured them that he had his own plans. Lulai's own CC call system assistant revealed a unique redemption code. The interface began to enter a sequence of cryptic codes with quick movements. After the successful redemption, 3 new items materialized in front of Lulai's QC assistant and recoiled to the side. Surprisingly, Lulai didn't recognize these unusual objects at first glance. He mentioned that these are the changes he made to the game's code. At the mention of the chit, the expression on CC's face changed. Promptly issuing a strong warning against the use of cheats and hacks, it scrutinized that such actions not only carry risk, but are also against the game's terms and conditions, which could result in a permanent ban from the game. Lulai remained unperturbed. He was sure that tweaks had been covered up deep in the game's code, beyond the reach of detection mechanisms. Even with manual research to uncover his ingenious work will take more than half a year. His first prize will be an Omniscient, a bracelet that gives a 5-point boost to all attributes, and the unique characteristic of this item is its ability to level up a character, upgrading every 10 levels and granting an exclusive skill. With each successive update, he retrieved a random achievement book that this peculiar item generated. Achievement quests based on character events, completing which gives random rewards. Lulai scratched his head as he typed in the commands for this item. He only typed "make it more powerful," leaving the rest up to him. To create the CC, the system assistant found this artifact. Particularly intriguing third and final item was the paramount invitation to Asura Purgatory, a coveted item to which Lulai has dedicated her 2 years of work at Destiny Corporation. It was a clue to a hidden storyline that his older brother was going through during beta testing, and potentially related to his sudden disappearance. As he unfolded the parchment, the system prompted if he wanted to move to the Asura class, which would trigger a whole new storyline. Lulai, without hesitation, confirmed his decision, as suddenly Lulai was besieged. His heart pounded furiously in his chest, and each beat was like a hammer hitting an anvil, and his breath came out in ragged sighs. 4 black-clad figures emerged from the darkness, speaking in an unintelligible language. In a swift, ruthless motion they all plunged a dagger into his chest. He struggled, but the pain he felt was too vivid, too chillingly real. A barrage of system prompts cascaded over him. In each of them he sees the death of his hero and the failed attempts to restart his life. Floating in the void, Lulai lost track of time, swallowed up by the black abyss. He felt that he was constantly falling. Repeated attempts to get out of the game proved futile. The system continually detects error codes that reject its forced exit commands. Attempts to clear system error codes failed. The system stopped responding after an immeasurable amount of time. When Lulai regained consciousness, he found himself clawing his way from the depths of the earth. Startled, he pulled up his character's attributes and found that his class had changed to a shattered skeleton. Pulling himself out of the grave, he stared at his skeleton in bewilderment. Memories of choosing Asura as his class were still fresh in his mind. He tried to understand how he ended up in this state, in this bleak landscape devoid of life. Lulai turned to the motionless figure that had been standing in front of him for a long time. From beneath the hood, empty eye sockets stared back at him. This figure was also a skeleton. He had a special aura compared to the others, dressed in a robe and cloak with a staff in his hands. He looked pleased with his new creation, a level 30 epic boss known as Lane, the Necromancer skeleton. Believing the skeleton summoner in front of him to be an NPC, Lulai immediately attempted to strike up a conversation with him and inquire about his current whereabouts. Lane stared back at him incredulously. Engraving his skeletal face, the concept of a summoned skeleton speaking caused the necromancer to be perplexed. Noticing Lane's silence, Lulai decided that he had not yet started the quest in question and made a move to retreat. This angered Lane, whose newly summoned henchman proved unruly. In response, the necromancer used the infernal iron chain skill, binding Lulai. Surprised by the attack, Lulai adopted a stern expression, demanding to know what was wrong. The reason for Lane's attack, the skeleton summoner finally broke the silence, stating that he was going to instruct Lulai on the manners of an obedient skeleton while Lulai tried to think of a way to escape. When he realized the gravity of his situation, he was just a level 1 character with no thinking skills. He cursed whoever had created the plot as suddenly a huge shadow swooped down on him. In the area coming from the creature in the sky, it was a colossal foot carrying across the sky towards the skeleton summoner, and the force of the foot hitting the ground threw Lulai several meters away. He crashed into the tombstone, trying to comprehend the surreal scene before him. Lulai's gaze fell on a creature of immense size, larger than even the Titans from Attack on Titan. Beneath the Titan's feet lay a pile of bones, the remains of a summoner skeleton. Stunned by the sight of the Titan's impassive care, Lulai poned that the creators considered these skeletal creatures as insignificant as ants forced to gather more information. Lulai summoned the CC of Fairies system, materializing a CECE casting before his eyes. Casting an appraising glance over his new skeletal form, eager to make sense of his surroundings, Lulai asked her about the CC. Clarified that he was in the Black Lands, a region infamous for giving birth to all bosses in the game and the home of the highest level of danger. Lulai immediately asked how he could start the storyline and initiate quests. CC promptly conducted a search and after a few moments informed him that there was a quest point 100 kilometers from his current location, to which, following CC's instructions, Lulai proceeded. During his journey he encountered many creatures, massive elementals. Dragons tens of meters tall roamed the land, crossing the vast sea space. In a terrifying encounter with a giant fish mutated from Japan's nuclear sewage, his only option was to make a hasty escape. Having been rescued more than once on a makeshift wooden raft, Lulai grumbled about the dangerous route. However, Ses remained undaunted, constantly prodding him and even offered to play a new song by a popular artist to defuse the situation. Suddenly CC notified Lulai of a message he received from AFE. In his message his brother revealed that he had successfully completed many major quests and had advanced to level 5, bragging about having a green quality staff, to which Lulai replied with a wry smile that he was a bit preoccupied at that moment. He wasn't making up his circumstances at the very moment he was running from a multi-legged monster hundreds of meters long. Lulai reported that they were approaching their destination. Exhausted and tired, Lulai felt numbness in his legs. The fatigue had reached such a point that he could barely maintain an upright position. However, he gritted his teeth and fought exhaustion, gathering the last of his strength to keep going. As he walked, a village appeared before his tired gaze. The entrance to the village was decorated with flowing magma. There were 2 entrances to the village, one glowing a cool, blue hue, the other a fiery red. The blue entrance was crowded with people. The SS estimates that it would take at least 2 hours to penetrate this pathway. On the other hand, the red entrance was deserted. Against CC's advice to wait and use the blue entrance, Lulai, driven by a sense of urgency and impatience, rushed to the red entrance. The entrance was guarded by 2 huge creatures with pig-like facial features. They laughed and happily welcomed Lulai's approach, offering no resistance and letting him pass. As Lulai bowed his hat in thanks to the guards, Gruff's reply rang out behind him. As soon as his figure disappeared into the room, the guards burst into laughter, painting vivid pictures of Lulai's inevitable and sad end. Meanwhile, unknowingly, an inexorable notification appeared on the system screen, the Wind and Cloud platform enrollment window. After the event officially closed, Lulai traveled through an endless tunnel until there was a glimmer of light. His eyes were blinded by the sunlight, forcing his eyelids closed. He has no eyelids, he's a skeleton. In the center of the stage, a quirky rabbit announcer heralded the exit of the latest competitor as he went over basic information about Lulai. The rabbit's eyes widened in disbelief that the newcomer was only level 1. Waves of laughter rolled through the crowd as Lulai's information echoed around the arena ahead of the gathering. The wary participants met him with contemptuous chuckles, not missing a beat. Rabbit quickly announced the start of the Wind and Cloud platform demonstration. Dual Mode Combat is the arena-style game of the day. To keep the competition balanced, all levels of applicants were standardized to match the lowest bidder, but not any bidder. The coveted prize for the winner was an impressive 5,000 experience points and an epic weapon to match their level. The challengers lowered their levels to 10, while Lulai was shocked. A stunned Lulai couldn't help but wonder if he had known this before. Would have heeded the fairy's advice and patiently waited his hour in line, when suddenly the system came to life, giving Lulai a surprise, a level 10 upgrade with a choice of starting profession. As he took a quick look at the options, swordsman, archer, assassin, support, mage. Among the other knights, his older brother's voice echoed in his mind. "You were born for the shadows, you're a killer by choice," he once said. Pondering these words, Lulai fumbled with his hand for the assassin option and after a moment clicked on it. It was decided to provide participants with a set of temporary equipment along with the profession. Lulai felt the cold touch of his newly acquired VIP dagger. The figure shimmered with an ethereal silver glow. He was one of the city lords of Blood Moon City. He had once become his disciple. One can go from obscurity to the zenith of one's life, with another notable figure sitting next to him. A woman from out of town. Lord took only one student under her wing, a prodigy from whom shockwaves emanated. Across Blood Moon City, Han Yixiao stretched out his hands to Lulai upon hearing this name. Involuntarily clenched into fists, it was his older brother's in-game name. Hope flickered in his heart that he had finally found a potential leader, and his gaze became hard and intense. The woman sitting in the VIP section, this woman known as Lilith, surely must have. She widened her eyes in surprise when Lulith's gaze sank into her without any semblance of fear. And then the tense silence was pierced by the voice of a rabbit, heralding the beginning. In the first match, the debutant is a towering figure with the head of a lion. As he entered the arena, his claws, glorified as the invincible, glistened under the spotlights. A collective sigh rippled through the crowd as they eagerly watched the figure in red rushing away. The lion-headed man swung his fists engulfed in flames, but the lion's claws struck with deadly precision, knocking his opponent down with a swift crushing blow. In the second match, the bulky zombie swordsman Barai easily works his way to victory. The third member, a sinister ghost with a double blade, extinguished it. Countering with a swiftness from which even the presenter's introduction lagged behind, murmurs of surprise swept through the crowd. The host stuttered as he introduced the fourth contestant, and disbelief was written all over his face. Rabbit announced the entry of the supposed cannon fodder, first-level participant Lulai. But before the crowd realized it, the fight was over, the battlefield silently crumbling into dust. It was so fast, so sudden, that even the rabbit's owner couldn't understand how Lulai had defeated his opponent. Next up was an exciting arena showdown quarterfinal, pitting Lulai against a formidable duelist. The juror, showing arrogance, scornfully mocked Lulai, telling him to lose the match. He even went to the extent of belittling Lulai's skill, claiming that he didn't even deserve to get his attention. But Lulai, with an indomitable spirit, did not give in to either anger or frustration. Instead, he cast an icy stare, an icy coldness lurking in his eyes. On the other hand, we had AFE, immersed in his own game world, skillfully leveling up with a couple of ladies, released a fireball spell with a single hand movement. After killing the goblin, the two girls tied to his arms would faint, praising his strength. In contrast, the atmosphere surrounding Lu Li had a different flavor. Ignoring Lulai's stoicism, drew his samurai sword and lunged at him. With a quick movement, unleashed his double-blade skill with a wave of the green sword. Energy zipped across the arena toward Lulai, but Lulai was unfazed. It defied logic. He dodged the energy blast, but attacked. But Lu Li deftly dodged the punch again, so disappointing to Lu Li began to attack With eagle-like sharp eyes, Lu Li carefully measured the length of arms and weapons, calculated his attack and studied the charging time. He was like a mathematician solving a complex equation, drawing conclusions based on the available data. Lu Li finally hypothesized that next attack would most likely use the instant strike skill that induced a temporary state of paralysis. Witnessing the punches that Lu Li repeatedly dodged, they could not refrain from mocking The last straw for rage blazed in his blood-red eyes. Teeth were clenched in a grimace of fury, and with unbridled anger unleashed the power of his twin blades. He unleashed an instantaneous slashing attack, pouncing on Lu Li. Lightning mobility deployed the critical strike skill. Like a surgeon performing a precise operation, Lulai delivered a swift and accurate blow to vital point. He felled him to the ground. After his victory, Lulai maintained a stoic silence as he carelessly walked off stage to prepare for his upcoming performance. The once bustling arena was now shrouded in an eerie silence. Even the host was stunned, unable to realize this turn of events. But as the realization came, the silence subsided. Changing to raucous applause for Lu Li, the audience was now fervently supporting him. The VIP's interest, if only for a moment, was piqued. Contempt for the skeleton race, considered the lowest of the bloodlines, was hardly characteristic of her. At the same time, though Li was at his best, the stage was set for the fight. Between Bloody Claw and Barry at first, neither of them made a single move. Blood Claw emitted an aura of confidence directed at Barry, declaring that he was no match for his power. Barry, however, only shook his head and said that although his kind could not withstand the claws of blood, if he wielded a sword, he could fearlessly take on any challenge with a determination as unshakable as Barry's rock. He leapt to his feet, his movement smooth and fluid, like a stream of water rushing toward a Bloody Claw. The moment Barry began to taste it, it already seemed blurry to the naked eye. Blood Claw glared at him with a contemptuous grin, his sharp teeth digging into Barry's weapon, shattering it. In an instant, veins from Bloody Claws swelled ominously on his arms. A furious counterattack, his blade-sharp claws piercing Barry through. The crowd watched in shock as Barry collapsed to the ground, and a blood-chilling laugh escaped Klaus' lips. Gloating over his fallen opponent, and the resounding applause of the audience only fueled his satisfaction. Even the two VIPs looked at him with obvious approval, turning their disdainful gaze towards Lu Li. Blood Claw mockingly predicted his doom, promising to tear him to shreds. A flurry of calculations began in Lulai's head. In terms of his qualities and skills, he was certainly superior to Blood Claw, but the only path that led him closer to the woman on the stage was the one paved with victory. His eyes widened. One could not give up even in the face of such an obstacle. If he bowed down now, how could he hope to find his brother? Their brotherly bond was his only link to his family in this vast world. With a determination as hard as steel, Lulai entered the battlefield. As the match began, Klaus' bloody taunts filled the air, humiliating Lu Li for his recklessness. Accepting the challenge, he grinned at the small skeleton standing before him, no thicker than his own muscular arm. Warning, Lu Li lunged at the bloody claw, but his speed was negligible. Earlier, Barry's attempts to perform a 360-degree spin in the air appeared to Lu Li. Behind the bloody claw, his dagger glinted in the pale light, but to his horror, Claw dodged the attack, ducking his head just in time. Blood Claw furiously responded with its claws, scraping against the stone bricks of the arena, releasing a powerful shockwave, targeting Lu Li in attributes and speed. Blood Claw was undoubtedly superior to Lu Li as a thin line of red suddenly appeared. The realization that he was injured appeared on Blood Claw's face, and he was stunned by a guttural roar. Anger burst out of him, signaling the activation of his powerful skill, each step shaking the scene. The tremor was evidence of his seething rage that was no longer content to play with Lu Li. Claw now wished for nothing but his own demise. In the blink of an eye, he was standing in front of Lu Li. His claws, wrapped around an icy gust, parted the air. Despite the flurry of punches, Lu Li dodged every strike from the blood claws. It landed with crushing force, two of which struck Lu Li's chest, splintering his skeletal form. Lu Li lost her balance, giving the bloody claw the perfect window to strike like a hawk pouncing on its prey. Claw leapt into the air and stood in front of Lu Li, gathering all his strength. He was focused on his goal of killing Lu Li the same way he killed Barry, but then the corners of Lu Li's mouth creased in a knowing smirk. No, he can't do that because he's a skeleton. Sharp observations from the previous battle revealed that the Blood Claw skill has a half-second pause. As soon as the unleashed Blood Claw skill was unable to deploy with the dagger cutting through the air, as Lu Li's viper turned into a streak of icy light and landed on her back with bloody claws. His trump card, the backstab, was activated, materializing behind the bloody claw in a flash. Lu Li's strategy was indeed sound, however defeating the bloody claw was not going to be a walk in the park. Bloody Claw let out a ferocious roar, crushing Lu Li's prowess suddenly. Lu Li found his body immobilized and refusing to obey his commands. As the rabbit host continued his enthusiastic commentary, he revealed that this was the signature move of the Lion Berserk Blood Battle Team, a skill powerful enough to paralyze enemies within a 5-meter radius for a full 1.5 seconds. A bloody claw swirled around, bolstering his strength for a ruthless onslaught. His claw lashed out, severing one of Lu Li's arms and taking half of his leg. Cold, triumphant laughter erupted from the bloody claw as it began to close the distance between him and Lu Li, enjoying the sweet anticipation of the upcoming victory. But even as the duel was nearing completion, Bloody Claw showed no signs of mercy. He wanted Lu Li to experience the full extent of defeat. Showed his fury while Lu Li's facial expression remained impassive. One thought dominated his mind. He had finally succeeded in wresting the Bloody Claw from his opponent. Claw takes a step towards Lu Li, contemplating how to finish him off, break all his bones or break off Lu Li's skeletal head. Lu Li counted 3 more steps in his heart. Blood Claw took another step. Seeing that Lu Li was silent, he took another step. He stepped viciously on Lu Li's severed limbs. Lu Li stood up violently, throwing the dagger in his hand and simultaneously severed limb to the ground. Also moving, throwing another dagger. Blood Claw seemed to see through Lu Li's actions, but did not notice what was behind him. 2 shadows appeared, simultaneously attacking him from both sides with a dagger. From behind, mercilessly dug into his cervical spine. A Bloody Claw coughed up blood and fell heavily to the ground. Everyone was stunned. The whole scene fell into silence. Even the rabbit commentator didn't realize what had happened. The commentator, as if under the influence of Viagra plus Red Bull, suddenly burst into a detailed commentary of this impressive counterattack. He realized it was all part of Lu Li's plan. Master Plan 1. Lu Li used his speed, inflicting minor damage to Blood Claw to enrage him and destabilize his emotions. And then under Blood Claw's full onslaught, Lu Li continued to feign weakness, luring Blood Claw to reveal his trump card. Most spectacularly at the end, it wasn't Bloody Claw who ripped off his limbs, and Lu Li himself, who broke them up when everyone already thought the match was over. Lu Li used a special ability of the skeleton race that allowed him to temporarily summon his severed body. To complete this unexpected counterattack, the turtle commentator posed with a nonchalant look. The facial expression pointing at Lu Li leapt into the air while the Bloody Claw, struggling on the ground, he tried to give in, but Lu Li didn't give him the opportunity. Suddenly, the person sitting in the VIP seats teleported down and stood in front of Blood Claw, clenching his fist tightly. Lulai's body began to shatter into pieces, bones shattered, only the skull remained. He was saved by the woman who gathered red energy on her finger, turning it into a sphere that rapidly expanded and flew straight at the man. Its destructive power was immense and half of the double platform was destroyed. The man tried to break free, but the beam hit him in the arm and he cussed. Since the woman had indeed tried to kill him, if she didn't give him a reasonable explanation, he wouldn't allow it. The woman paid no attention to him but began to reconstruct Lulai's body. Her fingers touching Lulai's skull, she softly said, starting, "Now you are mine."